So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us at this joint press conference with President of Poland and President of Estonia. We will begin with media statements, and after that we can take 1+1 question.
Historical connection between our countries. President Duda made his first visit abroad in Estonia back in August 2015. That gave a clear message how important he considers the relationships in our region to be. Now, in the end of his successful term of office, his state visit once again brings him back to Estonia. Europe is built on peace, freedom and cooperation. But currently, we must take action to safeguard, to protect it all. War in Europe does not allow for us to wait and to hope that somebody else will do something for us. We must sort our security out ourselves. In NATO and in Europe, we must start action. We need more investments in defense capabilities, in better readiness of the defense industry, and we also need a stronger political will. Poland here is a clear leader. Estonia is moving in the same direction. It is already next year that we will reach 5% of the defense expenditure of GDP. We are not doing it for the sake of just saying this, but supporting Ukraine is not temporary, but it is a conscious and long-term decision. We stand for continued military, humanitarian and economic assistance until Ukraine needs it. We cannot allow for possible ceasefire to become an opportunity for Russia for having a breather, for taking a break. This would only bring about new aggressions. Our goal is for Ukraine to remain free and sovereign, and for Ukraine to be able to defend itself and to restore its country. We support Ukraine not only on the front line, but also in reconstruction. Estonia is acting in Zhytomyr Oblast. Poland is acting in Kiev, Lvov, and Poltava. This is a strategic, not a symbolic work. We aim to help Ukraine join the European Union and to rebuild a functioning, resilient country. Our collaboration with Poland also reaches the economy. For Estonia, Poland is one of the most important trading partners in Central Europe. Estonian companies, especially those from the technology and education sector, see more and more opportunities in Poland. We have what to offer, and likewise we are waiting for Polish entrepreneurs to come to Estonia. Our economic collaboration is a natural part of trust and allied relationship. Also, we work together to increase connectivity and resistance to the hybrid threats, migration attacks, influencing activities, sabotage, and attacks aimed at the infrastructure. In the Baltic Sea region, we must better protect our cables, our pipelines, and critical connections. We support NATO's stronger presence, and in the upcoming months, we hope to conclude a regional agreement to protect these infrastructures. In the summer, there will be the NATO summit in The Hague, and there we must adopt a new and realistic strategy on Russia. Increasing the defense expenditure in NATO must be the norm, not an exception. Poland and Estonia are already doing it. We are not talking about having a goal, but about making clear choices and contributing really. Andrzej, I really appreciate your personal role in strengthening the relationships between Estonia and Poland. We are not just good partners, we are friends, we are allies. We are acting together, we are acting consciously and with a purpose. We have a common target. It is Europe, which is strong both politically, economically, but also militarily. Europe that will not wait, but will take action. Thank you.
Tänan, President Karis. Mul on au nüüd anda sõna.
Thank you, President Karis, and now I'm honored to give the floor over to the Polish President, Andrzej Duda.
Distinguished Mr. President, dear Alar, thank you very much for inviting me here and speaking open in office. And he was serving as president with former Polish president, Professor Lech Kaczyński. And together, myself and President Ilves went to visit the Museum of Occupation here in Tallinn, because on that day fell another anniversary of the treacherous Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, the pact between Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany, which, as a result, led to the outbreak of the Second World War, to the destruction of our countries and destruction of our independence. For me, to demonstrate our unity. Go on a train and we will travel together to Kiev in April 2022. We were some of the first presidents back then who arrived in Kiev to support in Kiev and in the suburbs of Kiev our colleague, President Volodymyr Zelensky, our ally, in his defense of the independence and sovereignty of Ukraine, and to support the people of Ukraine in their defense against Russian invasion. Back then, I did not expect that we would face so many challenges which we would have to meet. I would also not expect that we would have to defend Polish border as it has been happening since 2021 against hybrid attack, which is carried out by Belarus regime. Who could have expected that the Belarusian authorities, the Belarus regime, would be pushing illegal migrants to the Polish border and that we would have to defend our border? Until this day, we are grateful for the help that we received back then from Estonia. Thank you for your support. Thank you for the presence of Estonian soldiers who supported Polish defenders of borders in order to protect that border back then. Back then, we did not have a fence, we did not have a barrier built on the border. We did not have this kind of barrier as we have today, which is additionally protecting the border. Back then, we did not expect that we would need to have such a strong, robust defense of the border. And back then, we received support from Estonia. And to us, it was a sign of friendship and a sign of alliance. Because when we needed assistance, our friends, our neighbors from the Baltic state of Estonia will give us that help. And we saw that they were supporting us to the best of their possibilities. Thank you for that so much. This makes us even prouder to get involved in the air policing missions. As you rightly mentioned, Mr. President, right now our pilots are protecting also the Estonian skies. This is the 13th rotation. So this mission is protecting Baltic states. Polish F-16 jets and Polish pilots right now, as we speak, are involved in their 13th air policing rotation, and they are carrying out this task. This visit, indeed, apart from its state dimension, from its diplomatic dimension, and also next to its symbolic dimension, has got a very strong practical dimension from my perspective, because it is a preparation for two very important upcoming events, international events, which are awaiting us in the near future. The first of these is the Three Seas Summit, which will happen in Warsaw on the 28th and 29th of April, and almost 3 weeks, let's say. And there we will discuss problems concerning the development of infrastructure in our part of Europe. We will also discuss Rail Baltica, which you mentioned, Mr. President, Via Baltica, Via Carpathia. All of that will be on the agenda. We will also speak about synchronization of energy systems, which is, without any doubt, a success of Estonia and success of the Baltic states. And I'm glad that also we, as Poland, have contributed and we are supporting this process. We will also discuss other tasks related to energy infrastructure and all other kinds of infrastructure projects in terms of connectivity among our countries. We will also speak about strengthening the security because, as a matter of fact, most of those infrastructure connections which we are creating, which we are building, starting with energy connections through roads and rails, is supposed to serve also the strengthening of security. So, of course, all of that is about economy, the possibility of transporting goods among our countries, the possibility to bring them from our seaports to the south people so that they can move around quickly among our countries. It also opens up the possibilities for tourists. It will give people opportunities to visit each other, to build friendships, but also when there is such a need, there will also be a possibility to transport tanks, transport troops, to provide fast transportation of armored carriers and everything that is so important when we need to defend our countries. And this is also the purpose of the strategic dimension. So the Three Seas cooperation is important also in this respect. So I'm glad, Mr. President, that you will take part in the Three Seas meeting. We will host a number of guests from different parts of the world. We expect guests not only from countries which right now are strategic partners of the initiative, such as Japan, the United States of America, and Germany, of course, an important meeting bringing together leaders. And I hope it will also contribute to the development of our cooperation and development of investments in our part of Europe, in Central Europe. But, ladies and gentlemen, there is another big event to which we are preparing. President mentioned it. This is the Hague Summit, NATO Hague Summit, ahead of us. Of course, we discussed the issue of increasing defense spending. This is one of the main topics which is being discussed right now within NATO. I recently wrote an official letter to Secretary General of NATO, to Mr. Mark Rutte, and in that letter I proposed that all NATO allies should increase the minimum defense spending up to 3% of GDP, from the level of 2%, as we have it now, up to the level of 3% of GDP. This is exactly the same level which NATO members had in history during the Cold War. In other words, at the time when Russian imperialism was posing a threat to Western Europe. Today, the truth is that Western Europe, Central Europe, but also we are threatened by Russian imperialism. This time we can call it Putin's imperialism, we can give it any other name, but as a matter of fact, this is the very same imperialism. I always stress, it doesn't matter if it's the imperialism of Tsars, if it is a Soviet imperialism, if it is Putin's imperialism, it is always the same imperialism which is having the same goal. It wants to subjugate other nations. It wants to extinguish their statehood. It wants to spread Russian influence. But first and foremost, it wants to exploit states and nations, their natural resources, their land, and their possibilities. But we want to develop ourselves. We want to work for our own account. We want to cooperate with those with whom we do want to cooperate. In other words, with those who we choose ourselves, and not with those who is imposed upon us. So the defense spending today is of huge importance. We do not have any problem with defense spending because both Poland as well as Estonia exceeded long ago the threshold of 2% of GDP on defense. Today we are discussing 5% of GDP on defense in our country. Poland this year is spending almost 5% of its GDP on defense, and I know that in Estonia there is also a very serious discussion going on this very subject. There is no doubt whatsoever that we have to do everything possible to strengthen our armed forces, to increase their size, to modernize them. And this is exactly what we are doing right now in Poland. We are buying a lot of equipment from the United States of America, from South Korea, but we are also developing our own defense industry. And I hope that soon, a very serious item on the Polish exports offer in terms of armaments, Polish defense industry, will be a new infantry fighting vehicle named Borsuk. Right now, the first contracts have been already concluded for the Polish armed forces. It is our domestic construction. I hope that this offer will be of interest also to Estonia. But we want to expand our cooperation between Poland and Estonia, cooperation of our defense industries. This was also one of the topics on our agenda today. Furthermore, we support that Europe has such a policy which allows to develop our domestic defense industries. We hope that this trend is supported. We should try to be as self-sufficient in Europe as possible, especially in terms of ammunition production. Recently, it was demonstrated by the war in Ukraine. This is something that we're missing very much in Europe, and there is no doubt that we have to bridge that gap. We also discussed with Mr. President economic cooperation generally about its development. I do hope that this development of connectivity, I'm speaking especially about rail connections, Rail Baltica, but I'm also referring to Via Baltica. I hope that thanks to the development of those connections, we will also broaden the opportunities for investments in our countries. This will hopefully increase the interest. It will give the possibilities for bigger movement of business people and of goods, all of that, which is so important. And to conclude my speech, I want to stress once again, thank you, Mr. President, thank you for your invitation. This visit has a symbolic dimension to me, but more than symbolic. As I said, it's also got an extremely important practical dimension. Today, there are no contentious issues between Poland and Estonia. Myself and Mr. President sit and discuss, and as a matter of fact, we are just exchanging opinions, and then we are smiling and nodding our heads, because on all main topics we agree. Also, when we speak about international situation, but especially what is most important, security situation. So once again, Mr. President, I'm grateful to you for this invitation, and I'm thankful for this extremely nice and substantive atmosphere of the visit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President Duda. And now we can take 1+1 question. We have a question from Polish public broadcasting.
Polish radio, Agnieszka Drążkiewicz, information radio agency, with a question for both presidents. Today there was a lot about percentages that you said during this press conference. Of course, this is connected with the budgets. And my question is maybe I will force you to open up a broader discussion. We are discussing almost 5%. Poland has declared 5%, Estonia as well. But there are such countries, such as Spain, for example. Last year, Polish foreign minister visited Spain, and Spain is saying there is no option that it increases defense spending. But also, in many other countries, this debate is going on. France said once that it's not about percentages, but it's about other issues, who is giving how much on defense in other ways. Do you think that perhaps we should raise the bar? Mr. President of Poland said that 3% is the minimum, but maybe we can raise it up to 3.5% so that everybody can agree. Do you think it is acceptable and can it be adopted at the summit? And one more question, follow-up question. Speaking about percentages, we must also refer to the situation in the United States. The percentages, we're speaking about duties, custom duties. It is very negative. It's got very negative influence on the economy. We saw it on Monday. Is it not detrimental, harmful to all the allies? Is it not acting against Article 2 of the Washington Treaty? Article 2 says that allies should not be harmful to each other, should not be detrimental to each other. Thank you. So Mr. President is telling me to answer it first. Okay, so the question is from the Polish journalist, so let me start. Well, first of all, let me say the following. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this proposal was made 3%. I think it's logical. It's a logical offer because it has got its historical backing or reference. I mentioned when Poland nor Estonia were members of NATO, but the situation was similar, as a matter of fact, for the free world, for the West, as it is today. Because Russian imperialism is reborn. So we are coming back to the proposal. We're coming back to something that we saw in history. So we had 3% back in history. At the same time, we were increasing the current threshold. Everybody made a commitment back in 2014 to make this commitment of 2%. Now we're increasing it up to to 3%. I don't think it is unrealistic. Quite on the contrary, I think that this proposal is very realistic. I would say it is a logical and decent proposal. And let me say the following. I think that this should be a minimum. It should be a floor. Of course, if somebody wants to spend 3.5%, they can do so. If someone wants to spend 4%, they can do that. If somebody wants to spend 5%, okay. If they decide that this is the need, if it is justified. If somebody wants to spend 8%, they will spend 8%. But I think that 3 should be an absolute minimum. And for sure, we are going to discuss it right now over the next months, which are bringing us closer to the NATO summit. You have also heard the statements made by President Donald Trump about increasing defense spending in NATO countries. President Donald Trump mentioned on several occasions 5%. So the proposals which will be put on the table, probably they will be diverse. But I hope that the minimum threshold of 3% is something realistic, and that is why I support it. But of course, if somebody is asking me, are you going to support 3.5%? Well, ladies and gentlemen, my country, Poland, is spending almost 5% today, so I will agree to 3.5 if this is a proposal on the table, if all the others agree. Of course, I will agree too. If somebody says 4%, I will also agree to 4%. I don't see any problem here whatsoever. The question is it acceptable for our allies? Now, this is the question of responsibility for the security of the alliance. In Poland, we always stress NATO at 360 degrees. This is the binding principle. Today, of course, we have got a problem on the eastern flank, but nobody knows what problems we will face in 6 months or in a year. Who could have expected a Russian aggression against Ukraine? That we will see a full-scale Russian attack on Ukraine? Very few expected that to happen, especially if we look back at the year 2020 or 2019, 2018. There was nothing like that mentioned. We were thinking how to solve the problem of Russian-occupied Crimea or de facto Lugansk and Donetsk, which were occupied. But nobody expected a full-scale invasion to happen. Maybe we expected to achieve a success in the Normandy format or Minsk agreements, but these turned out to be a failure. So, ladies and gentlemen, nobody can tell what will be happening in Western Europe, what threats we will be facing. Maybe from the Atlantic or from Africa in the future, also for that part of the continent, also for the western part of the continent. So saying today that there is no need to spend 3% on defense, that this is not justified, well, I think quite on the contrary. We should defend that thesis that the threshold of a minimum of 3% of GDP should be adopted and achieved by the members of NATO. Now, the second part of your question, we will see what results will bring this policy. We still do not have such concrete results. Well, of course, we could see that the economic situation deteriorated for 2 or 3 days at the exchange markets, but this is not changing the situation across the globe. It is not some kind of a significant factor which would impact the state of our economies. And what results we will see? Well, we will see that in the future, what the results will be for the United States, what the impact will be for Europe, and we will see how we will shape our relations, especially economic ones, but also political ones. I always repeat one thing. To me, the Euro-Atlantic bond, not only the bond which is connected with the military security, but also the economic bond, this is the foundation of security, not only of the European security, but also across the Euro-Atlantic zone, which means, to a large extent, global security. And I think that it is in the interest of both Europe and the United States to make sure that we nurture, that we care for these relations. I also reminded to Americans when there were crises in Europe, when the First World War, the Second World War broke out in Europe, nobody else, but at the end of the day, it was American soldiers who had to come to Europe and fight in the war. It was in Europe that they died. And today in Western Europe, there are big cemeteries with American graves, young people lost by America. We would not like our countries to lose young people here in Europe. And we would not like, we don't want the United States of America to lose young lives. And I think this is possible when we have a good cooperation among ourselves, when we tighten our bonds. And the victory of the United States and of Western Europe in the Cold War against Soviet Russia, without one shot being fired and without loss of citizens' lives, demonstrated that this common policy, which is conducive to economic development, is the best and the most fruitful, the most effective.
Like President Duda said, we understand each other so well that we can just nod our heads. We don't need to say anything. And also with the answers that I heard from Mr. Duda, I can only agree to what he said. But a few comments. We certainly would not like to see there to be a fight for a percentage rate in The Hague, be it 3% or 5%. In Estonia, we are talking about 5% next year. This is not just a mere political decision, but it is based on NATO defense plans, and based on these plans, 5% has also been calculated for Estonia. Together with Poland, we can certainly be role models for others, and we can explain that if we currently are not spending enough, then in some time we might need to start spending much more resources in defending ourselves. The pace of increasing defense expenditure for different countries is different, but I hope that we can also coordinate the 3% goal, that it is achieved. I hope we can coordinate that. So let us see what will happen in The Hague and what will the results be. As for the second half of the question related to the customs tariffs, then I also agree that we must remain calm, because transatlantic relationships for Europe are important, be it military or economic relationships. We must certainly have a plan here, but I think we should keep calm and try to resolve these issues in a diplomatic way. The proposals by the US on customs tariffs need to be resolved diplomatically, I think. And it might help restructure, reorganize our economy as well, to see that something can maybe be done differently so that we would not be vulnerable to the customs tariffs. Estonian Public Broadcasting. I represent the Estonian Public Broadcasting. 3 questions. How will the relationships between Europe and the US impact the global war on tariffs and also the regional war of tariffs? What must be done in strengthening the Baltic defense zone in this year? And the third question is, in the European Union, there are some hindering obstacles to developing the defense industry. There are some obstacles to developing the defense industry, and people try to avoid these obstacles. So how could Poland and the Baltic countries collaborate in this respect? Thank you. Thank you. It was a question aimed at President Duda, but let me try to start first. Of course, the defense zone needs to be rebuilt. We also heard from the Polish Prime Minister's statement that we also helped them when the defense on the border was not like it is now. So we see that the border needs to be developed and the resource needs to be found. Of course, the defense zones are not enough to protect one's country. I already answered part of your question. And now, as for the customs tariffs, I also replied to that question, but remind me, please, what was the third question? It was about strengthening the collaboration here in the region. Yes, President Duda mentioned that they are strongly developing their defense industry and want to collaborate with Estonia. And Estonia is doing the same. As for the regulations in Europe, there is the understanding that we need to work on the regulations. We need to change the regulations. We must not evade or avoid regulations, but we need to change the regulations. We need bureaucracy that allows us to develop the military industry.
Let me say the following. I have had several discussions on this topic with President of the European Commission, Madame von der Leyen. I told her that we have to shape legal relations in Europe in such a way, and regulations on the economic development of our country, the possibilities to use European funds as well, to shape all of this in such a way that we can use the money also to develop defense industries. In other words, we have a similar situation which we discussed right after the coronavirus pandemic. Back then, we were learning lessons from very difficult experiences. We saw supply chains being interrupted. We missed basic protection equipment, anti-epidemic equipment. Very often we imported that equipment from the Far East, from China, and suddenly, when there were no deliveries, it turned out that we didn't have any equipment in Europe and we were not able to protect basic security. And also today, I'm saying the same thing. We need to have a situation where ammunition, for example, will be produced in Europe for our own European needs. But this requires time. We have to develop our defense industries in this respect. This requires the reconstruction or rebuilding of the defense industries, as a matter of fact. And today we should be able to use also European funds to do that. We should create possibilities to achieve that goal. Also in terms of budget, debt, and so on and so forth. So we should resolve all the issues which are impacted also by European regulations today. They should allow us or make it possible for us to make such spendings to the biggest possible extent. Why? It's not only about spending money, it's also, first and foremost, about the point that we are using these funds also to develop our economies. We should be using these funds to create jobs, new jobs in our countries. So as a matter of fact, it contributes to the economic development of individual European states, European countries, but also of Europe as a whole. So making some ad hoc adjustments, adjusting those regulations to the needs that we have is of big importance today. But there is a similar situation in terms of purchases. Today, until we do not have robust military production in Europe, we should have at least equal opportunities to make purchases also abroad, also with the use of European funds. Why? Because we need to modernize our armed forces fast. We need to supplement our military equipment fast. I can use my Polish experience and tell you 2 years ago, we started. Well, first we donated more than 300 tanks from the Polish armed forces to Ukraine. We just gave away those tanks to the Ukrainians, and we took those tanks from our soldiers, so we needed immediately to buy tanks. And then it turned out that nobody in the world, especially nobody in Europe, was able to deliver us tanks fast. There was no such production, no capabilities. So we decided, at the end of the day, to buy tanks from South Korea. Why? Because Korean K2 tank was the first which could come to Poland within 3 months from concluding the contract. And that was interesting to us, and that responded to our needs at that point in time. So I believe that today, when we are speaking about the modernization of the armed forces, but today when we are speaking about the development of capabilities, we are hearing voices today. We need to buy new A2AD systems, missile defense systems, air defense systems. Everybody's saying we need to buy new tanks. Everybody's saying we need to buy new cannon howitzers, state-of-the-art. We need to have place to buy them from. We need to have production. So first of all, this production has to be rebuilt on the one hand, but this is not happening overnight. It is happening over years, and we need to make purchases right now. And our policy right now has to be adjusted to that, because only then will we be able to respond to the need that we have, and only then we'll be able also to meet the demand, the commitment. This is our commitment vis-à-vis our voters, to provide for their security. The mic is not used. We cannot hear the question from the microphone. We are hearing that the equipment is being taken away from Jasionka, from the Polish hub, to other places. Can you tell us something more about the movement of this equipment? I cannot answer in detail what is being realized, what is happening right now, but I know this issue, yes, it is familiar to me, taking over responsibility over security issues of the airport in the city of Rzeszów, the protection of this airport. This issue was discussed before at the Allied level. No, we are not talking about the withdrawal of troops. It is not withdrawal of troops.
And for joining us. Have a good day.